Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, we've just experienced our first Jummah.
Alhamdulillah.
And the hadith that comes to mind, I also mentioned it on the Jummah as well, from Tabarani. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that from the evening of Jummah till Saturday begins, Yawm Sabt, that upon every moment 70,000 are being freed from Jahannam.
Subhanallah.
That's particularly for the month of Ramadan. It's crazy how easy it's become to seek forgiveness in this month of Ramadan. But 3rd of Ramadan, today, as we are experiencing now, also marks a particular day for the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, where we have special mentioning of the Lady of Paradise, the Queen of Paradise, and who is the daughter of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, none other than Sayyidatu Nisa'i Ahlul Jannah, Sayyidah Faatimah radiyallahu anha. It gives us great pride to even mention her name. To be from those that mention the name of the Ahlul Bayt is sufficient for our salvation and our forgiveness. Hafiz, have any comments on that before we go into a bit more detail?
حب آل البيت فرض عندنا وبهذا الحب لا نخشى المحن.
Subhanallah.
Loving Ahlul Bayt is a fard عندنا أهل السنة والجماعة. هذه بضاعتنا ردت إلينا. This is from أهل السنة والجماعة. Unfortunately, there's a stigma nowadays that if you make mention of Ahlul Bayt, that perhaps you are from a different sect. But this is هذه بضاعتنا ردت إلينا. This is ours originally. Loving Ahlul Bayt is from a sign of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah.
Subhanallah.
Allahu Akbar, radiyallahu anhum ajma'in.
And this day particularly is unique. See, anybody that passes away in Ramadan, the hadith describes that he's guaranteed paradise. Yeah? And Sayyidah Fatimah radiyallahu anha, she's already of the people of paradise. And she passes away in that month where we know her soul directly goes straight to paradise. Subhanallah. Allahu Akbar. And today what I wanted to discuss really in a bit more detail was her life, messages that we take from her life, so much that we can learn. There are elements of her, we will mention the general Fadail Manaqib, but there's also an element of her Tarbeeyah. There's so much to be taught, to be taken from parents, in terms of Tarbeeyah of children, and especially Tarbeeyah in terms of Islamically. Then there's an element of Haya, which she is known for her modesty, she being resemblant to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam more than anyone, Ashbahun Nabi, as Sayyidah Aisha describes. It's really up to you where you want to start.
I mean, what do you say about a lady that her husband is from the best of the Sahaba, her children are the leaders of Jannah, the youth in Jannah, her mother is from the greatest women in history, and her father is the greatest of all creation? Now, what do you say about a lady like this?
Naturally, you have Sayyidatu Nisa'i Ahlul Jannah. Has to be. Yeah, subhanallah.
Sayyidi ala Hazrat on this point, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, he praises Sayyidah Faatimah Zahra, as you've just mentioned, that who is she the daughter of, and who is she the beloved wife of, and who is she the mother of.
Allah.
So he describes Sayyidah Faatimah Zahra in such an amazing way, Allahu Akbar, and he does so in different maqamat, in different kalams, but this one in particular, Qasida Nur, he describes Sayyidah Faatimah Zahra using the word Nur 7 times. And he says, who is she? Nuro binte, Nuro zawje, Nuro umme, Nuro nur. That's 5. Noor mutlaq ki kaniz, Allah re lahna nur ka. He says, who is Fatimah Zahra? She is Nur. She is the daughter of Nur, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She is the beloved wife, the zawj of Sayyidina Ali, who is Nur. She is the mother of Nur Hassan, the mother of Nur Hussain. Nuro binte, Nuro zawje, Nuro umme, Nuro nur. And he says, Noor mutlaq ki kaniz, Allah re lahna nur ka. That when she is associated with such Noor, yani Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, her being a mother, Noor in of itself, the wife of Sayyidina Ali, and the mother of Noor and Noor, Imam Hassan and Imam Hussain radiyallahu anh. he says that this relationship, this spiritual connection that she radiyallahu anha has with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also of nur. Nuro binte, nuro zawje, nuro umme, nuro nur, nur mutlaqi kaniz, Allah lahna nur ka. And then he says in a different kalam, in the maqta, in the final verse, where he expresses his takhayyul, where the word, of course, raza is mentioned, and this is a common trend for all poets. He says, Kya baat raza, us jamanistane karam ki, Zahra hai kali jisme Hussain or Hassan Pool. He says, Kya baat raza, us jamanistane karam ki, that, oh Ahmad Raza, what astonishment and amazement I have over that garden in which Sayyidah Faatimah to Zahra is the bud, the sprout, which is ready to spring forth and to blossom and to flourish, and coming out of there is none other Imam Hassan and Imam Hussain. Kya baat raza us chamanistane karam ki, Zahra hai kali jisme. Sayyidah Faatimah to Zahra is the sprout, is the bud in that very garden. Zahra hai kali jisme Hussain or Hassan Pool. Imam Hassan and Imam Hussain are the flowers coming out of the bud.
There is no family like this in the universe. Like you mentioned, the Nabi Salatu Wasalam, Imamul Anbiya. Then you got then her mother, Sayyidah Khadija radiyallahu anha, who the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam described in great detail that there is no better woman than her in our time. In previous times it was Sayyidah Maryam radiyallahu anha, salamullahi alayha. But in our time there is no better woman than Sayyidah Khadija radiyallahu anha. So Sayyidah Fatimah radiyallahu anha, a quick intro into her bio. We know that she was born 2 years before the Ba'atha. Ulama have differed that she was born a year or 2 years before the first revelation came. Hence we notice that when Nabi Salatu Wasalam starts his da'wah program, a lot of the time we have so many stories where she comes and supports her father. Particularly the one where Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was performing salah near the Kaaba, he was in sajda. The mushrikeen put the intestine of the camel on the Prophet ﷺ's head, and he was struggling to lift his head from salah. At that time, the one that comes forward and supports him is the daughter, Sayyidah Faatimah radiyallahu anha.
How old would she have been if she's born 1 or 2 years before Bi'athah?
I think
she's 3, 4, 5 maybe like this, and ya salam.
We don't really know exactly when that happened,
Yeah.
but even if it was at the latter Meccan time, she would be at least 10 the most.
At least 10, yeah.
10 the most. And she's supporting the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A message, I mean, to the general public, daughters should always be supporting their parents. And we know, for example, even her mother, Sayyidah Khadija radiyallahu anha, when it came to supporting her father in the business ventures that her father used to take on, she was the man that she used to do all the bookkeeping for her father. Hence when she inherited all of that wealth, becoming one of the wealthiest women in Makkah al-Mukarramah. And then when she starts to do business and trade, that's when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam comes into her life. And then she sacrifices everything she has for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, all of her wealth. Allahu Akbar. And then Sayyidah Fatimah radiyallahu anha, there's a narration, subhanallah. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam always used to kiss her on her forehead. And Allama ibn Hajar describes this in detail. He says, what's the reason that the Prophet would kiss her forehead? He said that he would always find the fragrances of paradise coming from her forehead. And there are hadith on this subject that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was given Mi'raj hundreds of times before the physical one. So fil manam he had it hundreds of times. And only on the night of Mi'raj is when the physical one happened, 27th Rajab, yeah? So the Prophet ﷺ was asked, Ya Rasulullah, why do you kiss on the forehead? And he described that on one of those nights when I was having those dreams, and the dream of a Nabi is a reality. Isn't like us where we become unconscious. And Nabi ﷺ said that on that night, on one of those nights, I ate from the fruits of paradise. The energy that I gained from that fruit, that very night I then went to my wife and we had a physical relationship. From that she became pregnant of the energy that I took from the fruit of paradise, She says, till today, whenever I kiss Fatima on her forehead, I smell the fragrances of paradise.
Subhanallah, subhanallah.
And then she becomes the queen of paradise.
Allah.
And she's the role model for the entire ummah.
Radiyallahu anha.
Then we know that she migrates to Medina Munawwara, and year 2 is when her nikah takes place. Between Badr and Uhud was when the nikah of Sayyidah Fatimah took place. On the MCM page, inshallah, I have recorded a video that shall be released, and I've gone through the entire detail of the nikah, how the companions got involved, how the wives of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam all got involved, and everyone in the community took part in celebrating the nikah of Sayyidah Faatimah radiyallahu anha and Hazrat Ali karramallahu ta'ala wajhul kareem. Allahu Akbar.
Ya Rab. She's one of the greatest examples for the women of our day and age. I think one of the titles they used to give her was Ummu Abiha, the mother of her father. Like, she was in that much aid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam from as young as you're saying 10 years old, that she was known as the mother of her father, Ummu Abiha. Also, we also see that 10 years old, and look what she's doing. There's a very quick maturity amongst the Tarbeeyah that the Prophet ﷺ is giving to his own offspring, to his grandchildren as well, at such young age, to step forward, to be able to know that, that camel's intestine, I should take it off. Most 10-year-olds nowadays, if you compare it, how
they can't see blood.
Yeah, how engrossed they are in the dream world of games and this and that. They don't even know reality. And here, Sayyidah Fatimah is going and showing her support and defense of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam at the age of 10. So we learn that from the prophetic Tarbeeyah is not to keep your children, in this dream world for that long. Because as a kid, you always have that plainness. You don't show them any of reality and responsibility. But 10 really is the cap. And even in the books of fiqh, it says at 10, this is when you should be encouraging or even pushing that your children should be more responsible religiously, especially. So it's a great point for Tarbeeyah, isn't it?
I mean, what we do notice is the way of bringing nowadays is 10 years old are what, year 5, year 6?
Year 5, year 6.
Yeah, they're not expected to do anything at home. They go school. When they come back, food's already made, the house is clean, beddings are already been done, everything's done for them, it's put on a plate. They come home, they have the meal, and then they make their way to the masajid to do their Quran and Islamic studies. They come back and again, food's prepared, it's on the table, they come home, they eat, and then they're going to do their homeworks, and before you know it, they're going to sleep. They've never actually taken part in any of the house chores to actually, shadow their parents, especially the mothers. And daughters must take from their mothers. But nowadays, generally what I'm seeing, they don't get involved at all, and they're deprived of that. And one of a lot of problems that arise from that is when they do get married, they don't have any of those life skills. And the in-laws are demanding that you must be able to cook, you need to clean, you need to be on your feet, and take on those responsibilities. A lot of them have never done that stuff. Or, if you've moved, not just primary school, high school is the same. They go to school, they come back, everything's done, clean, cooked. They go to college, and then it's like, Mom, don't even touch me. I've got so many assignments, so much work to be done. It's really going downhill, isn't it? Per generation, especially in the West, the mahal and the lifestyle we have, it does not help at all. And we learn from Sayyidah Fatimah radiallahu anha at a very, very young age, she's supporting. In fact, I was reading somewhere that, young children, as young as 1, 2 years old, they're really creative and they like to explore. So they'll see anything the parents are doing and they'll want to imitate that, they want to do the same thing. And for example, my little one, Juwairiya, it's like mom's peeling potatoes, she wants to peel as well. She wants to use a knife and cut tomatoes, but we don't allow her because she'll hurt herself. But that inclination is there, isn't it? Because that's what she's seeing all day long. So the comment was that when children at that very young age want to participate, and they're doing it because they're being creative, they're investigating, they're learning, and at that time they're enjoying themselves. When a child wants to support her parent, that child is enjoying himself. And when that enjoyment, so that element of its Tarbeeyah, if that becomes enjoyment at that young age, let him enjoy himself. And then when that child now becomes 10, 12, 15, he continues to do those house chores as a normal routine because he's enjoying himself or she's enjoying herself.
It no longer feels tormentful.
Yeah, it's
burdensome.
Nobody's dictating now. It's not like mum's shouting at me and I'm being forced to do this and I'm forced to clean. That's going to happen if you've never allowed them. But if they started doing it from a young age when they were enjoying themselves, in that latter age when they're in their teens, they continue to enjoy it as well. Yeah. An element of what we can all take away, something that we can share.
Yeah, because they're like sponges, isn't it? At that time of their life, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, they can absorb anything around them. So if Tarbeeyah is going to happen, it's like that wise man. Somebody came to a wise man, and he said, "Can you help me with the Tarbeeyah of my child?" So he goes, "How old is your child?" And he goes, 7 years old. He said, "It's too late. The Tarbeeyah begins when you married the mother, and when you pick the mother. So Tarbeeyah begins well before that, but those initial stage is the perfect time for Tarbeeyah. If you look into the life of awliya Allah, many of them, what were they exposed to as babies? They're exposed to their parents reading Quran on them. Look in the life of Sayyidina Azam. He's hearing Quran from the womb of his, inside the womb, from the womb. So he's born upon listening to Quran. Understand? So that's something we should realize, that Tarbeeyah begins well before that. Well before 7 years.
If you look at the as a general practice from the awliya in Syria, when they used to go to the awliya and used to say, "I want my child to become such and such, how can we do it?" The ulama used to advise the parents, recite salawat when you're cooking food, and those same children, they grew up to become saints. That's just from the power, like how I was mentioned, just from the mother itself, and that's just from salawat in the food. And then obviously after that, you have all the other general practices as well. I think it's a good practice that many of us can incorporate as well, because it's light on the tongue as well.
I think it's very important from a young age for kids to understand and to learn from their parents the correct things. Obviously from the ages from when you're 1 till 7, kids are sponges, so they learn. That's how you learn to walk, talk, read, write. I think that's the most crucial years for children to learn.
Imam Ghazali even mentions that the child's phases in 3 phases, from 1 to 7, 7 to 14, 14 to 21. He says 1 to 7 you be with your child as if you're their best friend. Then from 7 to 14 you be rough with them, because that's the I hate my parents phase. And then you got your 14 to 21, that's where you be again, you be the best friend, but you be the proper parent, where you guide them and you tell them right from wrong, and you connect with them on a deep level. And I think that's one thing that we've all, and we can all testify to, that is very neglected now in our day and age, because I think many of the kids and children, they fail to open up to their parents because of that that they don't feel comfortable. But the parents are supposed to be that comfort, just as the husband is for the wife, vice versa. The kids are supposed to be the comfort for the parents, and that's how you build a strong relationship. But again, it's just due to the lack of tarbeeyah in the first place, and lack of knowledge of good parentship, of having that connection between your children.
I think Hafiz Sahib mentioned a very good point in the beginning, and just to add onto that point is, as the example from home with Juwaria, with the child, what parents lack sometimes, especially in the Indo-Pak subcontinent, and we've seen time and time, is when children go to school, they have this very high expectation that the teachers and the support workers are going to give them that tarbeeyah. Yes, an element of tarbeeyah is there, okay, don't call him names, or don't say nasty things, don't snatch, say please, these kind of things. But the actual tarbeeyah which we are referring to in light of Sayyidah Faatimah Zahra, that is only going to be done in the home by the mother and the father, and that's stamped. There's no other way around it. And another thing we find as young imams and Molanas in this room is that there is a very high expectation from the parents that Maulvi Sahib is going to teach the child everything. Maulvi Sahib is not going to teach the child to stop using the phone in class and to stop messaging his friends. He's got 30 other kids to look at and to listen to their asbaq. So these small things, saying Assalamu alaikum when you walk in, reciting Bismillah, Jazakallah Ustaji, these small things are going to be taught by the parents in home, the good conduct, the well-being, talking politely, showing the elders respect. This is all from the home. And I think the parents do have that kind of far-stretched expectation from teachers, schools and madrasas, whereas they are the ones that are liable and responsible for that tarbeeyah in the home.
I think madaris and ulama are looked down upon the most in this element. And brilliant point you made, Adnan, that the expectation that your child is going to come to the masjid and within an hour and a half he's going to become a wali of Allah. It's completely false. Yeah, you live in a dream world to expect that your child is there for 8 hours at school, and in 1 hour the local Maulvi Sahib is going to do justice to his Islamic tarbeeyah. It's not going to happen. In fact, with my experience as a head teacher for many years in different masjids around Manchester, those kids that are most successful are those where there is active parenting. Parents are most involved. You know, you have those parents that are just going to drop them to the masjid, yeah, as a pick and drop service. And some people like it to be a McDonald's drive-through. You come in and the child is ready, he's just going to be whacked into your car and off you go. That's the type of service they want. And you know, when Salah time kicks in, it's home time, Adhan's happened, parents are fighting outside, why is my child late? Well, your child was reading Maghrib Salah, and the mother and father kicking off in the car, why is my child late? Next time you're not going to do Maghrib, you're going to come into the car first because we've got priorities. What message are you giving to that child? That child is learning Salatul Maghrib is no longer the priority. You just get on with what parents want you to do. And those parents that actually follow up what the child is doing in the masjid. So in my experience, there's only, so at VP for example, we have 270 plus students in the madrasa. I only know 3 or 4 parents that come in every other week to ask how's my child doing. The other 270 students, their parents have never come in.
Even between us, if we all call on our experience of teaching, we've got quite a number of years of teaching between us. Think of all the best students you had, those who really impressed you.
Yeah.
And you'll say they come from a household where tarbeeyah was being given from their parents, religious tarbeeyah. They've grown up in that sort of situation. And the parents are actively still involved. So, you know, you're 100% right.
It's not sufficient to just send your child and say, look, that's it, everything's done.
You can't just unload them onto us.
Yeah. You have to follow up. And not just Islamic tarbeeyah and Quranic and Islamic education, even in schools. The students that progress and do best and become professionals in whatever career they take are those students where at home parents are always supporting them. Yeah. They have the extracurricular studies, they have tuitions, they have evening or weekend, tutors coming in. Those students do well because parents are fully involved and they want them to succeed. And the students that do really bad are those where parents are never involved.
I think a lot of parents these days as well, they tend to kind of make excuses of, there's not enough time to do this or do that, or we're
Some of them treat their children like they're the biggest burden in their life. Yeah. As if I had so many aspirations prior and because of you now. And then they raise them up with that sort of spite of their children. Whereas, as Rahad mentioned, they should be coolness of your eyes. That's the dua that you make. رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ.
So I come from a background where I was raised by my mother, so my father wasn't there from an early age. And my mum did. She went to college, she went to university, she looked after me, ran a household, took me to extra classes, did karate, I did maths class, extra maths class. She did that as a single mum. If she can do that as a single mum, then why can't people who have both parents do that?
Yeah.
I think this is a lot of the case nowadays as well. When you look at parents, they expect their kids to become something based off no support, based off nothing. They say, I wish my kid done this, why can't my kid be like this? They don't realise that the stem root is them, but they don't want to put the work in. They just want to sit at home, do their X, Y and Z, affair, and deal in their own affairs, and let their kid do whatnot, and expect something, to have something offshoot from them. That's golden, but it doesn't work like that. Like Hafiz said, looking at the parents' tarbeeyah, it's years of dedication and years of, not brainwashing, but drilling within the kids what's right from wrong, what you need to do, what you're not to do. Then you'll get the offshoot of Didn't get your golden child.
Molana, sorry, go on.
Well, there's another thing as well. I heard in a speech on YouTube, it's in Arabic, about people when they're having children, they do it in a state of heedlessness. The children are a mere byproduct of their cohabiting of their wife. Whereas what it used to be was, the way the Sunnah teaches is, having children is an active thing you do with intention. You should make niyyat that I'm pleasing Allah, I'm pleasing my Prophet ﷺ as well, and have aspirations for that child before it's even born. Inshallah, this child I'm going to name him Muhammad or whatever name, and he's going to become this, he's going to serve the deen. Most people actually don't even give that the thought until after the fact. He's born now. What should I name him? What's he going to do? And then afterwards they start to compensate for it. But it should have been done with intention at the time. And the Sunnah teaches us that when consummating your marriage as well, when actually aiming to have a child, there is dua to be made to keep shaitan away from that person. And that teaches us you need to have a conscious effort, a conscious thought about what this child's going to be for me, and what's he going to do for the ummah or even for the world at large, etc.
This morning at Fajr Salah, Qibla Walisa was mentioning a hadith. So in the virtues of reciting Bismillah,
So
the Prophet ﷺ said that when the husband and wife intend to mate, before they undress, they recite Bismillah. The impact of that is that that child is then secure and safe from the impact of shaitan. And for as long as that child lives, every second he breathes, he becomes a means of forgiveness for the parents.
Allah.
Because before they unclothe themselves, they recited Bismillah.
Look at the example of Sayyidah Maryam and her mum, Hannah. What did she say? إني سميتها مريم وإني أعيذها بك وذريتها من الشيطان الرجيم فتقبلها ربها بقبول حسن وأنبتها نباتا حسنا. It's not even, you can't even translate these ayat. But that conscious effort that the wife of Imran made, prior to the child being born. Then the child is born. Before the child is born, she's making dua. إني نذرت لك ما في بطني محررا. Child is born, she's seeking protection for the child. إني أعيذها بك. Ya Allah, give her to your protection. وذريتها, and the children that come from Sayyidatuna Maryam. And what child was born from Sayyidatuna Maryam? Ruhun min Allah.
And then later on she goes on to say that I give this child fi sabilillah. She was straight away, before even she had the child, she says I've dedicated this child towards Allah.
There has to be a maqsad,
Yes.
a purpose. It's not just having a child for the sake of having a child. I mean, you had time to have a kid, but you've not got time for the tarbeeyah now. And when you're deciding to actually have a child, it's almost a 20-year, 25-year commitment you're getting yourself into.
Minimum.
Which is what a lot of people fail to realize. For them, it's like, have a kid and that's it, job done. And then the rest of their life, they're on benefits or whatever they want to claim. For some, it's a financial gain. But in reality, it's really more, it goes much deeper than that. And like you highlighted, even before the birth of the child, the selection of the mother is when the tarbeeyah of the child begins.
Yeah.
Every child has the right to good parenting and has a right to have a good mother. When you deprive that child of a good mother and your intention for marriage was not the deen, it was in fact your own pleasures, your own worldly gains. And if you go to even further back, like the Prophet ﷺ said that تُنْكَحُ الْمَرْأَةُ لِأَرْبَعِينَ. Yeah, you marry a woman for 4 things. لِمَالِهَا وَلِحَسَبِهَا وَلِجَمَالِهَا وَلِدِينِهَا, in this order. He mentioned wealth first.
فَظْفَرْ بِذَاتِ الدِّينِ.
Yeah, فَظْفَرْ بِذَاتِ الدِّينِ تَرِبَتْ يَدَاكَ.
Allah.
If the intention right day one was his own sexual desires and fulfillment of his desires, then do you really think when they're undressing they're going to be reciting Bismillah? Do you really think that when he's climaxing he's going to recite the dua which the hadith describes,
Right.
that you blow on the forehead of your wife before you climax, and that will protect the child and that sperm which is to become the child from the influence of shaitan?
Allah.
We know ulama, they actually Sufi have described, even in that moment they're not forgetting Allah.
Wow.
Even in that moment they are still reciting du'as for the protection of that child. And those children then when they grow up, when you have parents like that, then when the mother becomes pregnant with the child, then you'll have examples like the mother of Sayyidina Ghawsul Adam radiallahu anhu, who are reciting Quran throughout the day. And the child is born as a Hafiz of 15 juz of the Quran.
You've got people nowadays who play sounds to a pregnant woman's lady, tummy, and they're playing music to it. Yani, waba. This is waba. It's a disaster.
And science proves a child a fetus in the womb hears and experiences everything.
And remembers. I remember I read a study, and they played some sounds to the fetus or to the baby in the tummy. And they analyzed the brain of the baby, is it responding to it? And then when the baby was born, they played the same sounds, and the same reception was found within the baby's brain, and it remembered.
No.
So when Ghaus Azam was born, a Hafiz of Quran, a Hafiz of X amount of ayat, it's not a surprise. Scientifically, this is possible.
Something beautiful
Mumkin.
that, in my teacher in Egypt, Sheikh Umar, he mentioned his story about who his parents were. He said his dad, he was a farmer, he didn't know how to read or write. His mum, she only knew how to write her name, and she only knew Surah Ikhlas and one other surah. But he said due to their sincerity, he became, and he is one of the biggest muqris in Cairo.
Sheikh Umar Rajab.
Just from Ikhlas, and that the parents didn't know anything. So you don't have to know a considerable amount of knowledge or anything just to have pious children. I say to this day, and I'm not saying this out of Josh, out of my teacher, but he's the person who I've seen who has the most taqwa I've ever seen in my life from a teacher, such that he kisses his students' hands, and that's from the Tarbeeyah of his mother and father.
Just to inshallah stir the conversation smoothly, Molana, you mentioned the point of burden that the parents feel this, and one thing in my experience, or what I've seen, family members, friends, is that one of the most detrimental things to a child's mental well-being is when the parents begin to compare the child with other children, with children from the family and cousins, and what they don't realize is if that child is genuinely in his jayas, worldly as well as dini endeavors, he's doing well, and instead of motivating him and bringing him kind of back to that love and compassion and say, these are your qualities, this is what you're good at and you should continue, and really giving him that shabash, what they're doing is kind of creating that spite and malice and hatred really for the other child that he is being compared with. And there what happens is, I see that instead of that child then enjoying and kind of finding himself or herself, what starts to happen is then there's this competition and it loses that value. That was one thing you mentioned regards the burden. The other thing from a professional working experience is that for some reason, this is opinionated, it's not harf-e akhir, and you can disagree with this, and many will, and you're open to do so. But I find it very ajib and strange that parents have this intention of offspring and children, Hafiz has mentioned, whether they are ready for this or not, and they want to have 4 or 5 children. But then they begin to pursue these really extraordinary careers. And what happens then is that the majority of the time is spent in work. The mother and father cannot give that time. Then you're looking for the khala, the mamu, the pupi, and so on to look after the child. And I think in that respect, this is also a form of neglect. It's really good to have the career aspirations, but within the measure that you do not neglect your child. And I have heard from colleagues at work say this, that the child said to the father, "You're never at home, I never see you," because when it's child's time to awake and play, he's working, and vice versa. And coming to the final point, the hadith, again in line corresponding to what Hafiz Sahib mentioned, is it's really renewing that intention. And if this means by speaking to the elders in the family or your local imam, because he will always give you the fruits of the deen and Quran and Sunnah of why you should be having children. And the biggest thing for me, Hafiz Sahib, is the hadith clearly mentions the 3 things that continue to benefit you when you enter the alam of barzakh. And the greatest thing from there is a
waladun salih yad'u lah. And then you've got situations now where because of people's upbringing of their children, the child's got no other choice, but when he thinks of his parents, he thinks nasty thoughts, his absence, his harshness upon me. And parents who do that stuff, who live such a life, shouting at their children, beating them, being nasty with them, and then just before the deathbed they expect them to make dua for them. But if you bring them up in such a way that they can do nothing but sing your praise, then after you pass away, of course they're going to continue to sing your praise. Of course.
It even has a
With
generational effect. I was actually reading it today because in the, I think it was in the Shadri Tariqa, or in general in the turuq of, amongst the Sufis, they say that, they say try not to go for a woman, or try not to make your tendency towards those who have broken families, because they'll bring that baggage within that, regardless of whether it's apparent or not. They'll bring that baggage within it, and it'll manifest within the lineage or when it comes to the marriage itself. And then from there, it's just domino effect. Illa mashallah, accept with the other
touching on so many problems within a what you really need is an ideal community where everyone's had the right parenting, right Islamic Tarbeeyah. They then get married, they have lawful children with the lawful intentions, and that needs to continue generation after generation to produce a high caliber of iman. What we're seeing now in the recent few generations, those that have settled here in the West particularly, they've come here with the intentions of money only, and when they've had children here, it was only for them to support them financially, make more money, and that's what's being passed down per generation. Islam and Deen was never there.
There's a command in the Quran, وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ
خَشْيَةَ إِمْلَاقٍ.
خَشْيَةَ إِمْلَاقٍ. Don't kill your children because of fear of poverty. Now, of course, that's referring to back in the day, people would actually go and kill the children. I can't support it. But we're still doing the same thing, or parents are doing the same things emotionally. Because, of poverty, fear of poverty. I need to go graft. But you're not seeing the detrimental impact that's having on your child's psychology, your child's mental well-being, their well-being, etc.
Even nowadays, the divorce rate is just being thrown around so often, but where are they getting it from? It's come from somewhere.
Obviously married people are giving divorce, aren't they? It's not non-married people giving these
divorces. I think he's saying, why are we or youngsters using those words? Maybe they've seen it growing up. Maybe they've seen that harsh tongue growing up.
But I think even then, the hadith about when two people get divorced, the Arsh of Allah shakes.
Allah.
Just from a divorce. And how many divorces amongst them? I actually remember there was a family friend, and they were mentioning, and this stemmed from you can say it was a marriage where it didn't have the most blessings within it. It was a lot of music, dancing, etc. I think there's about nearly over 50 grand the wedding was spent on.
That's normal.
Affluent family, but 50 grand, and there was a lot of. I think that was just on the Mendi, by the way.
Oh, okay.
He got the wedding. After 3 weeks,
divorce. Even you're saying that you need an ideal scenario, a situation for good children to come from.
Because when we mention finding a spouse, and you're looking for the deen, obviously somebody needs to give her that deen, that religious upbringing, for her to now fit that category where you're saying my intentions and her intentions are that we're looking for a pious individual and we give birth to noble children.
From Quranic epistemology, it's not always just what's around you. Sometimes the effects of having pious ancestors can have an effect as well. So if you look at the time of Al-Khadir and Musa alayhi salam, and how he intercedes in regards to a wall that's about to break, yuridu an yanqad, and he fixes that wall. Why? He says, وَمَا فَعَلْتُهُ عَنْ أَمْرِي. It's not because he wanted to do it, Allah wanted him to do it. Why? وَكَانَ أَبُوهُمَا صَالِحًا. And the Mufassirun mentioned that generations and generations before, they had a pious, very, very pious grandfather. 7 generations prior. And because of him, Allah not only sent Al-Khadir, this great saint, but alongside him, Nabiullah Musa, Kalimullah Musa, and alongside him, Yusha ibn Nun. He becomes Nabiullah as well. So he sent 2 prophets in the servitude of these 2 ghulamain, yatimain, because وَكَانَ أَبُوهُمَا صَالِحًا, their forefather was a righteous man.
In the book Ta'lim wa Muta'allim, they said something there which was very, very beautiful, and it hit home with me very, very deep, and it's something that stuck with me since the day I read it. It said, when usually you have a grandfather, let's just say for example, case scenario, you had a grandfather and he wanted his child to become a Hafiz, or he wanted him to become an alim of the deen, and he didn't become an Hafiz or Hafid an alim, then in most cases the grandchild he then will become a Hafiz or an alim as well. And in looking at a lot of the cases, I've seen it come to fruition. So many people who are Hufaz or who are ulama nowadays, their grandfather themselves or grandmother who wanted their same father or mother to become a Hafiz or an alim, who didn't, they had the fruits of their ancestors and they reaped that reward of becoming a Hafiz or an alim. And I think that's something, just having pure intentions from your ancestry as well, I think goes a long way.
Passes down a long way.
Yeah.
It goes a long way, of course. We're touching on so many subjects. I think we need more time, really. I mean, it's a subject on its own is finding a spouse and giving general marriage advice. That's one big subject I think we're going to have to touch on
Tarbeeyah itself is
somewhere in this podcast, maybe tomorrow, whenever. Then you've got, having children and, elements of that Tarbeeyah from a very young age, covering that stage by stage. You mentioned on some between the age 7 to 14 is that really vital age where they're exploring, they're making their own decisions. What decisions do you need to really steer for them so that they are leading towards the religion? Because you lose that age and that child is gone. And with the fitna that we have in this time, this age that we live in, with the LGBT influence, the exposure that they have to adult content, the exposure they have to nudity, and how that's psychologically affecting them. We're mentioning of Sayyidah Faatimah radiallahu anha, and we say that haya is the thing that's highlighted most in her life. Something that we need to, again, it requires a lot more discussion. One podcast is not going to do anything.
You mentioning from that haya perspective, it was in a hadith that when Fatima, when she was commemorated for her haya, to such an extent that the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that she is a part of me just from her haya. And even Aisha radiallahu anha, she noticed that she had never met someone so truthful who's truthful in her character.
There's actually good mention there of Sayyidah Aisha, because there's a common misconception, obviously from other sects, that there was some sort of tension between the two. But if you look at all the manaqib of Sayyidah Fatimah, a lot of them are narrated by Sayyidah Aisha.
Yes.
And that shows you there was nothing but love and reverence for each other. Though Sayyidah Fatimah and the age of Sayyidah Aisha, but Sayyidah Aisha is still her mother at the end of the day, Ummul Mu'mineen. So there's great reverence between the two as well.
We've got a live question from the live audience.
The problem is that some parents, they're too strict on their child, and then vice versa, that they're too lenient on their child. What is the middle kind of part where you should be equal? What is too strict and what is too lenient? Where should you be as a parent?
I think that all depends on the child as well. What the
I think we're opening a can of worms.
I think subjective.
This is going to go on.
It's opening a can of worms.
Yeah, like I said, I think we definitely need more time to delve into these subjects in a bit more detail and give more context.
Yeah.
Moving on, so just so we can complete.
Yeah, I think we
do
advise the viewers though that spend some time in Ramadan learning about Sayyidah Fatimah. She's a great example, great example, and there are many more auspicious days coming in Ramadan where there will be other companions being remembered. So spend time within Ramadan as well, learning about those people. They're your greatest examples. They're your qudwa, they're your uswa, the people we should be following. Instead of getting online and following this influencer and seeing how that person lives their life, or ma ila dhalik, we've got the greatest of women. Her life is accessible through the tradition of hadith, through the tradition of the Sahaba. We can learn about those people. Literature is allowing us to do that as well.
To make an additional point, there's a good book, and quite a few of the ulama have actually recommended this book. It was called, there's 3 books. It was something called Happy Housewives, something Womanhood, I can't remember what it was, and there was another book. But if you look at the core concepts of all these books, it was exactly the same lives and the principles as the companions, all the female companions lived as. It was this, and even those. It's not just for Muslims. This is these books authored by non-Muslims, and the non-Muslim women are living themselves who are on the brink of divorce have said, "I'm now submitted to my husband, and I'm living the happiest."
Talk about kind of worms.
Yeah.
and I'm living the happiest marriage, and I never thought I would be able to. And these core principles, they come back from the companions.
Yeah, look, if if you want an example, you look at the most successful people on earth.
Yeah.
And the most successful have been the companions of the Prophet.
Subhanallah,
So is that a better example we're looking for?
Subhanallah.
So the West is looking for examples. They refer back to Islam. They're referring to the Ahlul Bayt, the family of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
You know, I was once listening, I think you talked about in one of your khutbahs about the blessings of a daughter. I think
I
it's
mentioned
Jummah
it today as
khutbah.
well in Jummah as well.
And when you were talking, I was thinking that, you know, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said those words, who was he thinking of? When he says the daughter
Subhanallah.
is X, Y, Z, and all those amazing things, who was he thinking of? Is Sayyidah Fatimah radiyallahu anha. So it's just amazing. It was just a thought that came to mind.
Just to conclude on your point, inshallah, of course, the creators of social media and this entertainment and phones and what have you, they are aware of individuals like this and their success and how Islam has been derived from their lives and been brought to us. And just a message for the youth, the youngsters, the viewers watching, as Molana has mentioned, take some time to put aside this influencer and that influencer and this motivator from YouTube or whatever social media platform you're using, and come back to the basics, because what a contents of a book is going to give you, online entertainment is never going to give you that, because the creators, they know exactly where obviously the success lies for the Muslims, and they're obviously always going to put obstacles and things in the way. A good example would be, we hold the Quran in this manner, but we hold our mobile phones and iPads in the same way. We hold the Mus'haf in this way, and then it's been replaced with the PlayStation controller. So it's dil ko samjha dene wali baat kind of thing, as they say, that you have to really kind of put yourself in that situation and say, it's the month of Ramadan, who can I go to for help from the Ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And for our honourable dear sisters and mothers, the likes of Sayyidah Aisha, Sayyidah Khadija, and as we were mentioning, the honourable Queen of Jannah, Sayyidah Faatimah Zahra. It's their seerah, it's their way of life. If we can get to the core of that, inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would really bless us in this life and hereafter.
You know, there are youngsters, if you say, I want to learn about X subject, Y subject, they'll be able to list about 15, 20 influences. Yeah, if you want to learn about bravery or this, that and that. But how many of us can say, well, if you want to learn about bravery, this companion, if you want to learn about haya, that companion, etc. Yeah, it's a real measure of where we are and where we should be.
You know, for the past 3 Ramadans, there's a series on YouTube called The Stories of the Prophets. And every Ramadan, I've been watching that. And subhanAllah, one thing is, it brings you back, and it makes you realise that these are the true heroes, these are the true,
100%.
the true people. It's not these influencers and these other people that are out there. I think it's...
See, for the last 2 Ramadans, you've not been watching the podcast. That's a mistake you've been. You should be watching Pursuit for Happiness.
You know when they say, don't be like Tom, don't be like this guy.
Yeah.
Watch the podcast.
This is the stuff you should be watching.
In the podcast.
He's in the podcast.
Allah.
We should make it a condition in it. Have you watched all episodes and then you can
Yeah,
say
you've got to do a catch up, yeah?
Yeah.
You can't just jump into series 3. First 2 series. Speaking of, you mentioned influencers and role models. For the women, we always say our role model is Sayyidah Fatimah radiyallahu anha. But how much do we actually take from her life? And we say she's the Queen of Paradise and she's our role model. How much do we know about our Queen?
Yeah.
Like, do we know what age she was when she got married? Do we know when she had her first child, her second child, her third child? And her virtues, her manaqib. I mean, we're really so far away from her uswa alone. We're talking of haya. Again, inshallah, one of the subjects I have for an entire discussion, inshallah, is haya as a whole.
Yeah.
In modern times, where do we draw the line? What's haya in our time and age that we live in? Because it's become so diluted, distorted. Everybody has their own little caliber of haya and what they consider to be the best haya.
Yeah.
But we really need to refer back to these heavenly women, to the Ahlul Bayt alayhim ridwan, to know what haya is, to know the uswa. And inshallah, in the days to come, we'll have more discussions.
Yeah.
I think it's best we conclude.
Yeah. We'll conclude with that. Learn. If you learn, you will love. So learn to love, and then you will love to learn.
And the next major date in Ramadan is the 10th of Ramadan,
Yes.
which is where the day that Sayyidah Khadijatul Kubra radiallahu anha
Allah.
passed away. So if the viewers are taking our advice and they want to proactively work towards that, then start to read on her seerah before we get to the 10th.
Inshallah.
But then you'll have enough content information and then inshallah we'll elaborate. And I think because she's our mother, we're going to be discussing a lot more detail, regarding mothers and her relationship with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
That's a wicked subject on its own.
Inshallah. Hayyakumullah.
Barakallah for my panel. I'm going to introduce my panel now as we conclude. So on my right we have Rahad, Mustafa, Hafiz Rahad, Mustafa. We have Molana Adnan.
MashaAllah.
Whether you know me or not doesn't make a difference. But on my left hand side, this is what I wanted to introduce. Saqib Saqibi is the name that we've given him. Yeah, and mashallah, he was here yesterday and he was giving us some really good feedback yesterday.
MashaAllah.
So I thought we'll get him on this side of the cameras now.
Alhamdulillah.
And then of course, Hafiz Saab's always here with us,
Alhamdulillah.
a phone call away from us. Barakallah Ahbab, and I'll see you tomorrow inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.